Hello, I'm Juanita Borton, Training Officer with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Today I'm going to walk you through how to track four-year maintenance postcards in WisVote. This webinar is pre-recorded and is available on the WEC website on the webinar page, and also on the Learning Center website. This webinar will count as 30 minutes of recertification training for clerks who use or plan to use WisVote. Let's get started. Today's webinar will focus primarily on how postcards will be tracked in WisVote. We recently held a webinar on the topic of postcards, and much of the background and general information about four-year maintenance was covered at that time. I invite you to revisit that recorded webinar for additional information. But we'll start today with some of the basics. The 2017 four-year maintenance cards will be mailed on or before June 15th. They will be sent to all active voters, excluding military, who last registered on or before December 31st, 2012, and who have not voted since January 1st, 2013. We'll begin by looking at how postcards are tracked in WisVote. When the four-year maintenance list is generated from WisVote, any voters identified on that list are marked with the status Active Suspended. The responses that are tracked in WisVote include cards that are returned as undeliverable by the post office, cards that are returned by the voter who has signed the card and is requesting continuation, and those that result in a request from the voter or a voter's representative requesting that the voter record be deactivated. This might happen if a voter has moved or been convicted of a felony, or if the voter has died. There are two ways of tracking postcards in WisVote. You can track them either from the letter view, which is a list, or from the letter record itself. You may have noticed the Easy Navigate page now contains a Letters tile under the Voter section. Use this new tile to access the four-year maintenance tracking page. The page that opens will default to the 2017 four-year maintenance pending list. There are a couple of things you should know about this. First, it's defaulting to the pending list, but the default status is temporary. The default will remain as it is until this round of four-year maintenance is complete. Four-year maintenance is providing an opportunity to pilot enhanced tracking for letters. This page may later be used for other letter types, as well as four-year maintenance, and the default setting will likely be changed depending on when four-year maintenance or ERIC list maintenance postcards are sent. Across the top of the page, you'll see the buttons that are available on this page, and they include Scan Response, Undeliverable, Request Continuation, and Request Deactivation. This list is displayed as pending contains the names of all voters in your jurisdiction who were sent four-year maintenance postcards and that haven't been tracked with a specific outcome yet. As postcards or continuation requests are received, there are a few different ways of tracking them. Let's start with an easy one. From this list, if you want to mark a single card as returned by the post office as undeliverable, put a check in front of the mailing ID to highlight that row. Once the line has been highlighted, click the Undeliverable button at the top of the page. A letter response window opens. The first step is to enter the response date. Click in the date field, and when the calendar opens, you'll notice today's date is highlighted in yellow. No dates after today are available, but any prior date is. The date should be selected by clicking the date on the calendar. This response date should be the date that you received back the undeliverable postcard. Finally, click the Submit button. The record we updated is no longer displayed in the pending list. WisVote will automatically change the voter status from Active Suspended to Inactive Undeliverable Mailing. Let's look at another way of tracking the returned postcard. In this case, we're going to click on the voter's name to open the letter record. You can see in the header that the page that opens is a letter record. As we saw on the list, the letter record also has response buttons at the top of the page. On the right side of the header, you'll see three pieces of information: letter type, response date, and response type. These fields are for display only. All of the letters currently displayed will have a letter type of 4-year maintenance. In this case, we're looking at a letter that is in the pending list, so there has not been a response date or type added. To mark this individual record as undeliverable, click the Undeliverable button at the top of the page. Just as we saw before, a response window opens, and we need to click the response date field and select the date from the calendar. And like before, we'll then click Submit. After clicking Submit, the letter record is closed automatically, and you're automatically directed back to the pending list. The record we just updated no longer appears in the pending list. Next, let's take a look at how to select multiple records that have the same response type. For example, if you have 3 postcards from voters requesting continuation. As before, put a check in front of the mailing ID and continue to select records that you want to update until you have selected all of them that you want to mark. Once all of the records to be updated have been selected, click the Response button at the top of the page. In this case, we're going to mark these 3 records as Request Continuation. And just as we saw with the undeliverable, we need to click in the Response Date field and select the date from the calendar. And finally, we click Submit. Once again, after clicking Submit, the 3 letters that were marked as requesting continuation have been removed from the pending list, and the list has been refreshed. The 3 voters' new registration status will be changed from active suspended back to active registered. Next, let's take a look at how request deactivation differs from the other response types. Once again, we can select the voter's letter from the list, or we could open the letter record itself. In this case, I'll check the box next to the mailing ID. With the record highlighted, I'll click the Request Deactivation button at the top of the page. Just as before, I click the field for the response date and select the date from the calendar. When requesting deactivation, I have an additional step. Here I'll click the drop-down for the status reason. I'll select the reason from the list, and then I'll click Submit. In the record that has now been moved from pending, because we deactivated the record at the voter's request, the status is changed from active suspended to inactive, and with the status reason that was our selected reason in that case. So in our example, the voter requested deactivation because they had moved. The status reason is now inactive, moved. I have one more method of tracking to show you, and this option allows you to scan the barcode on the postcard. For this, I'll click Scan Response at the top of the page. A new window is opened. From here, you can record multiple responses that include any or all of the response types. To begin, I click the drop-down on the Response Type field. For my first postcard, my response type is Request Continuation, so I select that from the list. And then, just like before, I click the Response Date field in order to view the calendar and select the date. Next, I'll click in the Mailing ID field in order to place my cursor there, and then I can either scan the barcode or manually enter the mailing ID, then click Record. Now I can continue to scan or enter mailing IDs for each of the postcards I received that indicated requests for continuation on the date selected. Once I've entered all of the responses that match that type and date, I can continue tracking additional responses by selecting a new type and/or date. In this case, I'm just going to change the response type and leave the date as it is. Again, I'll click the drop-down for the response type list. And this time, I'll select Undeliverable. I click in the mailing ID field and then I either scan or enter the mailing ID and click Record. Next, I'll repeat the process for those that are requesting deactivation. I begin again by selecting the drop-down list for the response type. And I select Request Deactivation. As we experienced before, this time the screen displays a little bit differently. Now I have to select the status reason, essentially the reason for deactivating this voter record. In this example, the voter has requested deactivation, but they haven't provided a specific reason. They've just stated that they want to have their voter record deactivated. So I'm going to select Voter Request from this list. Just as I did with the other responses, I'll scan or type the mailing ID, then click Record. Notice that all of the responses that I recorded during this session are listed in a grid below. The most recent is listed on top. When I'm done tracking my responses for today, I'll use the X in the top right corner to close the window. When we are returned to the 4-year maintenance pending list, in this case, I've recorded responses for all of the postcards that were in my pending list, so the list is blank. To review cards that have been marked with a response, I can view all of the responses by changing the view. If I click on the chevron to the right of the 2017 4-year maintenance pending, I see a list of the available view options. For now, I'm going to select the continuation list. When the continuation list is displayed, if I see an error, perhaps I recorded the wrong response type, I can easily correct that by selecting the voter's name in the list. As we saw before, on the letter record, the letter type, response date, and response type fields are displayed in the header on the right side. These fields are locked and cannot be changed. The buttons displayed at the top of the page are used for changing those response type and dates, the same way we used them when we were initially setting the response type and date. In this case, I'm changing the response type from Request Continuation to Undeliverable. As before, I click on the Response Date field and select the response date. Then I simply click Submit. Again, when we click Submit from the letter record, it automatically closes that record and we're returned to the list that we were viewing when we selected it. When we're returned to the continuation view, the record we just updated is no longer displayed in this list. If we again change the view, this time to the Undeliverable list, the letter we just updated is now listed here. If we click on the letter and open it, the response type has been updated. Notice that the letter record does not contain an option to save the record. The only way to make changes on a letter record are by using the response buttons at the top of the page. When changes are made, the record is automatically closed after the change has been submitted. If you aren't making any changes, you can exit the record just by clicking Cancel at the top of the page. Finally, let's take a look at the changes on the voter record that occur as a result of tracking the postcard responses. After opening the voter record, scroll down and open the Activities and Notes tab. From here, you see the letter activity has been added. You can open the letter record to see more detail by clicking on the letter icon. From here, you can review the information on the letter record or update the information just as we did when we selected the letter from a list. Remember that the only way to exit the letter record is to use the Cancel button. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at some of our frequently asked questions regarding 4-year maintenance.
What should I do with the undeliverable postcards after I enter the response into WisVote?
Remember that undeliverable postcards are official registration documents, and as such should be attached to the original voter registration application. The postcards and registration forms may be destroyed after 4 years.
What if I receive a postcard back as undeliverable after July 15th?
If the continuation request postcard is returned by the voter on July 15th, you may reactivate the voter record. If they return it any day after that, you should let them know that they are not currently registered and should instruct them on how to become registered. You are not required to track responses after the 30 days are up. However, the WEC is required by law to report the number of undeliverable postcards, so it's best that you mark these with the correct response. You should be able to make this change easily by finding the letter on the voter record and clicking the Undeliverable button.
What do I do if I get postcards back from the post office, but they don't have any sticker on them?
In this case, you should contact your local post office and ask about their process for returning undeliverable postcards. Different post offices may have different procedures. In the past, for example, there were some post offices that banded a group of undeliverable postcards together and only put the undeliverable sticker on the top postcard to indicate that all of the postcards within were also undeliverable. If you have any questions about how postcards are processed by the U.S. Postal Service, please contact your local post office for clarification.
What do I do if I receive a postcard returned as temporarily away?
According to the U.S. Postal Service, the term temporarily away means that the holding period for this address has expired. The address is a valid address for the voter, but delivery of the notice was not successful. You should resend the card in a new envelope and permit forwarding on it. The voter will still need to sign the application for continuation of registration in order to remain actively registered. I'll take just a minute to review one other possible notification from the post office, and that is forward time expired. When you receive this particular notification, you should go ahead and record that postcard as undeliverable.
What should I do if the voter's parent contacts me and tells me their son or daughter is in the military and stationed overseas?
In this case, the voter would only have been sent a postcard if they are registered as a regular voter, as opposed to a military voter. To remain registered, the voter would still need to fill out the request for continuation and return it to the clerk's office. However, if the voter wishes to be recognized as a military voter, the clerk should provide information to the parents and/or to the voter to have the voter use the military voter option on the MyVote website.
Should providers send a list to reliers of the voters whose status is changed to inactive 4-year maintenance?
The best practice here would be for the provider to send a list of all of those voters who have been automatically deactivated as a result of the expiration of the 30-day time period. The WEC is in the process now of developing a view that will appear after July 15th to show those postcards that are not marked with a response. At this time, I'm not sure what the name of that view will be, but you're going to find it in the same place you saw the 4-year maintenance pending and the 4-year maintenance continuation, the 4-year maintenance undeliverable. This might be called 4-year maintenance no response, but I'm not sure exactly what that name will be. Once this view becomes available, and sometime after July 15th, you should be able to open up that view and then export the list to Excel. Then you can share that list from Excel with the relier. Let's take just a couple of minutes and do a quick wrap-up. Remember, postcards are mailed to voters on or before June 15th. You should mark responses as you receive them. So anytime you get a postcard that is undeliverable, or if you receive requests for continuation or deactivation, you should track them the same day they are received. After 30 days, WisVote will automatically change the voter status to inactive 4-year maintenance. We're working on developing an additional view under letters for viewing those postcards that haven't had a response tracked after 30 days, so watch for that. Remember, when you enter or change the response type, the voter status is changed. When you select the response type of undeliverable, the voter status is changed to inactive undeliverable mailing. For request continuation, the status becomes active registered. And for request deactivation, the voter status becomes inactive, and the reason will be based on the reason that's selected in the tracking window. Remember, that might be inactive moved, inactive voter request, inactive deceased, or inactive felon. And let me leave you with just a couple more reminders before we go. First, we will be starting the ERIC list maintenance in the next few months. So watch for any training materials that may be sent out regarding the ERIC list maintenance tracking. Also, we'll be sending out a schedule for the next WisVote webinar series that'll start this fall. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.